I am 104 years old, and if there is one thing I have learned in all this time, it is that the heaviest regrets are not the ones about what you did. They are the ones about what you slowly stopped doing, without even noticing. My name is Ernesto Ferretti. I am 104 years old, and there is something I could have still fixed at 50, but I didn't, and that thing cost me almost everything. I want to talk to you about my son Marco, not about who he became, not about what he does now. I want to talk to you about what happened between us when he was 20 years old and I was 50, about how I let silence creep in between us, the way dampness creeps into an old stone house, slowly without you noticing, until one day you realize the walls are cold and you can no longer warm them. I was born in 1921, in a small town in the province of Bergamo. My father worked in a factory, my mother sewed at home. We were not poor, but we were not rich. There was always bread on the table, always warm soup in the evening, and always that feeling that tomorrow depended on how early you got up in the morning. I grew up with this idea that a man is measured by what he builds, by what he brings home, by what he leaves behind, not by what he says, not by what he feels. I married Lucia in 1947. I was 26 years old, she was 23. She was a serious, intelligent woman with those dark eyes that looked right through you without asking your permission. We loved each other the way people loved back then, with little said and much done. She knew when I was unwell from the way I sat at the table. I knew when she was sad from the way she ironed the shirts. We did not need many words between us, and for years I believed that was the same with my children. Marco was born in 1952. He was the third child after Elena and Gianni. But Marco was different. He was the kind of child who asked questions you did not know how to answer. Why does the sky change color? Why do people die? Why do some people have more and others have less? I answered as best I could, with the patience of a tired man who came home from work at 7 in the evening. But inside me I felt something I could not name, a kind of pride mixed with unease. Marco saw the world differently from me, and I did not know whether to love him for it or worry about it. When he was 16, he told me he wanted to be a painter, not an engineer, not a doctor, not to come work in the factory like me, a painter. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee in front of me, and him looking at me waiting for an answer. I did not say anything cruel. I did not shout. I did not insult him. I simply said, in that flat voice fathers use when they do not want to argue, think about finishing school first. And I changed the subject. He understood. Children always understand, even when you pretend there is nothing to understand. He understood that for me, that was not a serious answer to a serious question. And something in him closed, the way a window closes when it feels cold air. He finished school. He found work in an office in Milan. He married a good girl, Claudia, and they had 2 children. From the outside, everything looked fine, and for years, I looked at his life thinking, I did the right thing. I helped him find the right path. But the right path for whom? For me, not for him. The problem was not that Marco had not become a painter. The problem was what had happened after that conversation at the kitchen table, and after all the similar conversations that came in the years that followed. Every time he tried to tell me something important, I found a way to step aside. Not in a cruel way, not with anger, with that polite distance that fathers of my generation used as a shield. Good. Well done. You figure it out. Or silence, or a practical piece of advice when he was looking for something completely different. By the time Marco was 30, he had already gotten used to not coming to me for the things that really mattered. He called me for practical things. If he needed advice on a mortgage, he called me. If he needed to change his car, he called me. But if he was going through something difficult with Claudia, if he had fears, if he felt lost, he did not call me. He called Lucia. Always Lucia. And I, foolish as I was, told myself it was normal, that children talk more with their mothers, that it had always been that way, that I had done my part by bringing home bread, putting them through school, buying the house when they asked. What more was a father supposed to do? I was 50 years old when Lucia said something to me that I have never forgotten. We were in bed, it was late, and she said, without raising her voice with that calm she always had, "Ernesto, Marco does not know you, and you do not know him, and if you wait any longer, you will not have time to fix it." Then she turned over and fell asleep, as if she had said the most ordinary thing in the world. I lay awake all night. I knew she was right. I knew it in that way you know things when you are alone with yourself in the dark, with no way to deny them. I knew that between me and Marco there was a pane of glass. Transparent, yes. We could see each other, we could speak to each other, but we could not truly touch. And that glass had been put there by me, piece by piece over the years, with every short answer, with every subject changed, with every moment I had chosen not to be present even when I was sitting in the same room. And that night, at 50 years old, I told myself I would fix it, that I would call Marco, that I would tell him what I felt, that we would talk the way we should have talked for years. I did not do it, not because I did not want to, not because I was a bad person, but because the next morning I got up, went to work, and life carried on. And the thing I had decided to do that night stayed there, in the drawer of important things we always put off, convinced we have time. Lucia died in 1989. She was 62 years old, a cancer that had not given us much warning. She was gone within a few months, and she took with her that silent bridge she had held up between so many relationships in this family. After her, Marco and I found ourselves alone facing each other, without that voice in the middle that always knew how to soften things. The funeral was hard. The months after were hard. Marco came to see me often. He brought the children. We cooked together. We talked about the past. But even in that shared grief, even with that enormous loss between us, we never managed to reach the real conversation we should have had. It was as if the door was there, open, even, but neither of us knew how to walk through it without making a wrong step. The years passed. Marco became a grandfather. I became a great-grandfather. And we saw each other for birthdays, for holidays, for Christmas. There was warmth, there was affection, there was respect. But inside me, every time I came home after saying goodbye to him, I felt that same thing I had always felt, that I had seen him, but I had not truly met him. I was 90 years old when something happened. Marco was going through a very difficult time with Claudia. Serious problems, years of accumulated distance, a crisis that seemed like it could take everything away. And one evening he called me. I do not know why that particular evening, perhaps because he had no one else, perhaps because he was tired of carrying the weight alone, and he said, "Dad, I'm scared." 2 words. Only 2 words. But they were the first real words he had said to me in 50 years. And I, who had learned something over time that I had not yet known how to do at 50, said, "I know, I was scared too many times, and I never told you, I'm sorry." And then I went quiet, and he cried, and I cried. And I do not know how long we stayed like that, on the phone, saying almost nothing, but it was the first time in our entire lives that we were truly in the same place. Marco and I made up for lost time in these last few years. Not everything. You cannot recover 40 years of distance as though they never existed, but we found each other at last with the slowness that comes when you are old and you forgive each other things. He comes to see me every week. He brings me coffee. He tells me about his life. He asks me what I think. And I answer him honestly, not with the short answers of before, but with what is truly inside me. The other day he said to me, "Dad, I didn't know you had lived through all those things." And I understood that for my whole life I had presented myself to him as a function. as the father who brings home bread and gives practical advice, not as a man with his own fears, his own regrets, his own unanswered questions. I had hidden myself from him, convinced that a father had to be strong and silent, and in doing so, I had taken away from him the chance to know me, and I had taken away from him the model of how to be human inside a relationship. 104 years. And the greatest regret is not something I did. It is that night, at 50 years old, when I knew exactly what I needed to do, when Lucia had told me clearly, when I felt it inside me as an absolute certainty. And then the next morning I got up and chose the road I knew instead of the road that frightened me. If you are 50 or 40 or even 60, and there is someone in your life with whom you have that pane of glass between you, listen to me. Do not wait. Do not wait for the right moment. Do not wait to find the perfect words. Do not wait for the other person to make the first move. You do it now. Because the time you think you have is much less than you believe, and the courage you think you will always lack will be even harder to find 20 years from now. Marco is 72 years old now. He is a good man. He has become a better father than I ever was, and that gives me more pride than anything else I have built in this life. But sometimes, when I sit outside in the afternoon sun and think about everything that has been, I still feel that night at 50 years old as a fixed point in my memory. That night when I knew and did not act. I do not want you to have your own night at 50 to carry all the way to 104.